Natalie Harper had always believed that marriages didn't crumble overnight. They eroded slowly, like coastlines worn down by relentless waves. Small things, barely noticeable things, a kiss that landed on the cheek instead of the lips, a phone call taken in another room, a smile that didn't quite reach the eyes anymore. She told herself these were normal. 9 years of marriage meant familiarity, routine, comfort. Not every day could feel like the honeymoon, but somewhere deep in her chest, beneath the reassurances she whispered to herself each night, a quiet alarm had begun to ring. It started on a Tuesday morning in late September, the kind of morning where the air smelled like rain that hadn't fallen yet, and the kitchen was filled with the soft hum of the coffee maker. David stood by the counter, scrolling through his phone with one hand while holding his mug with the other. He was dressed for work already, which was unusual. Normally he lingered over breakfast, read the news on his tablet, complained about traffic he hadn't encountered yet, but lately he was always in a hurry. Natalie poured herself coffee and glanced at the clock. 7:15 in the morning. His office didn't open until 9. She had asked him about it last week. He said there were new projects, urgent deadlines, clients on the East Coast who needed early meetings. It made sense. It always made sense when he explained it. But the feeling in her chest didn't go away. He kissed her cheek without looking up from his phone. Not her lips. Her cheek. She noticed. She always noticed now. "Have a good day," he said, his voice pleasant but distant, like he was speaking to a co-worker. "You too," she replied, watching him grab his keys and wallet from the counter. He paused at the door, checked his watch, then glanced back at her. For just a second, their eyes met. She thought she saw something there. Guilt, maybe, or calculation. But then he smiled, and it was gone. "Love you," he said. "Love you too." The door closed behind him. She stood alone in the kitchen, holding her coffee mug with both hands, staring at the space where he had been. The house felt too quiet, too empty. She shook her head, told herself she was being paranoid, and sat down at the kitchen table with her laptop to pay the monthly bills. That's when she saw it. The joint checking account statement loaded on the screen. She scrolled through the list of charges, her eyes moving automatically over the familiar entries. Grocery store, gas station, electric bill, mortgage payment. Everything normal, everything expected. Then her eyes stopped on a line near the bottom. Riverside Coffee House. $7.50. She frowned. The name meant nothing to her. She had never heard of that place. She clicked on the transaction to see more details. The charge was dated last Tuesday, September 19th, 10:15 in the morning. Her mind immediately went back to that day. She remembered it clearly because it was the morning David told her he had an important meeting across town. He said he wouldn't be home until late afternoon. He had kissed her goodbye, grabbed his briefcase, and left early, just like he had been doing for weeks. But this coffee shop, where was it? She opened a new browser tab and typed the name into the search bar. Riverside Coffee House. The results appeared instantly. A small independent cafe with good reviews, cozy atmosphere, excellent pastries. She clicked on the location. Her heart sank. The cafe was 10 minutes from their house, in the complete opposite direction from where David said his meeting had been. She sat back in her chair, staring at the screen. Her pulse quickened. It could be a mistake. Maybe he stopped there on the way back. Maybe the meeting location changed and he forgot to mention it. Maybe. But the doubt was louder now. Louder than the reassurances. She tried calling him. The phone rang 4 times, then went to voicemail. She hung up without leaving a message. 2 minutes later, her phone buzzed with a text. "In a meeting. Everything okay?" She stared at the words. In 9 years of marriage, David had never ignored her calls. They had an agreement. If she called during work hours, it meant something was important. He always answered. Always. Even if it was just to say he'd call her back in 5 minutes. But now he was sending texts instead. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. She wanted to ask him about the coffee shop. about the meeting that supposedly happened on the other side of town, about why he was suddenly too busy to answer her calls. But something stopped her, an instinct, a voice in the back of her mind that said, "Don't show your hand yet." "All good. Just checking in," she typed back. She set the phone down and returned to the bank statement. Her eyes moved slowly through the other transactions, looking for patterns she had missed before, and that's when she found them. Small charges, $11.50, $15 even, $9.75, all to a company called HBR Consulting. She had never heard of it. The charges appeared weekly, always on Wednesdays, like a subscription. They went back months. Small enough to slip under the radar in a busy checking account, small enough that she had never noticed them before. She typed the company name into the search engine. Nothing came up. No website, no business listing, no reviews. It was like the company didn't exist. Her stomach twisted. She grabbed her phone and opened the Notes app. She started documenting everything. The date of the Riverside Coffee House charge, the time, the amount, the dates and amounts of every HBR Consulting charge. She took screenshots of the bank statement and saved them to a locked folder on her phone. Then she closed her laptop and sat in the silence of the kitchen, her mind racing. Something was wrong. She had known it for weeks, but now she had proof. Small proof, strange proof, but proof nonetheless. David was lying to her about where he was going, about what he was doing. And if he was lying about small things, what else was he hiding? 3 days later, on Friday evening, David came home with flowers, pale pink roses, wrapped in expensive paper with a silk ribbon. He walked through the door with a smile that looked rehearsed, like he had practiced it in the car on the way home. Natalie was in the living room, folding laundry. She looked up, surprised. David never brought flowers without a reason. Birthdays, anniversaries, Valentine's Day. But it was late September. No special occasion. "For you," he said, holding them out like an offering. She took them slowly, searching his face for answers. "What's the occasion? Do I need an occasion to bring my wife flowers?" He leaned down and kissed her forehead. His lips felt cold. "I guess not," she said, forcing a smile. "Thank you. They're beautiful." He seemed pleased with himself. "I'll put them in water for you." He disappeared into the kitchen. She heard him opening cabinets, running the faucet, humming softly to himself. She stared down at the roses in her hands. They were beautiful, expensive, but they felt wrong, like a distraction, like a performance. When he returned from the kitchen, he suggested they order takeout and watch a movie. They did. He was attentive, laughed at her jokes before she even finished telling them, poured her wine, held her hand during the movie. It wasn't affection, it was a script. During dinner, he leaned back in his chair and said casually, "You know, I've been thinking about our finances." Her fork paused halfway to her mouth. "What about them? We have so many different accounts. Savings, investments, emergency funds. It's kind of a mess, don't you think?" He smiled, his tone light and reasonable. "What if we consolidated everything into one place? It would be cleaner, easier to manage, and safer, you know, in case something ever happened." The words were gentle. The meaning was not. Natalie set her fork down carefully. Consolidation meant control. It meant turning many doors into one locked room with a single key. And he wanted that key. "I don't know," she said slowly. "I kind of like having things separate. It makes it easier to track different goals." "I get that," he said, nodding like he understood. "But think about it. If we had everything in one account, we could see the big picture better, plan for the future more effectively." "Maybe," she said, "but work has been crazy lately. Can we revisit this next month?" His smile flickered, just for a second, like a light bulb losing power. Then it came back, bright and warm. Of course, no rush. But there was a rush. She could feel it. That night, after David fell asleep, Natalie slipped out of bed and went to the home office they shared. The room was small, lined with bookshelves and filing cabinets. In the corner sat their wireless printer. She stood in front of it, her heart pounding. Most people didn't realize that wireless printers stored a history of everything they printed. Every document, every photo, every page. She pressed the menu button on the printer's small screen and navigated to the print history. The list appeared. Recent jobs, boarding passes, grocery lists, work documents, and then, near the bottom, something that made her blood run cold. Asset Division Spreadsheet, version 2. Her hands trembled as she stared at the screen. Not a budget, not a financial plan, a division. He was already dividing their life into pieces. She wanted to print the document, to see what he had written, but that would leave evidence. He would know she had been looking. Instead, she pulled out her phone and took a photo of the screen, making sure the date and time were visible in the frame. Then she exited the menu and left the printer exactly as she had found it. She walked back to the bedroom in the dark, her mind spinning. David was asleep on his side of the bed, his breathing slow and even. She stood in the doorway, watching him, the man she had married 9 years ago, the man who used to hold her like she was the only thing in the world that mattered. Now, he was a stranger planning to take everything from her. She climbed back into bed carefully, so as not to wake him. She stared at the ceiling, listening to the sound of his breathing, and made a decision. She wasn't going to confront him. She wasn't going to cry or beg for answers. She was going to watch. She was going to document. She was going to learn exactly what he was planning. And then, when the time was right, she was going to protect herself. The next morning, Saturday, she woke up early and went to the kitchen. The pale pink roses were still on the counter, sitting in a crystal vase. She adjusted one of the petals and smiled. Let him think she believed him. Let him think the flowers worked. Let him think she was still the trusting wife who didn't ask too many questions. She wasn't that woman anymore. Over the next week, Natalie began to pay closer attention to everything. She noticed that David's phone was always face down now, that he took it with him everywhere, even to the bathroom, that he had started using the Do Not Disturb mode constantly, claiming it helped him focus on work. She noticed that he checked his watch more often, like he was counting down the minutes until he could leave the house. She noticed that when she asked about his day, his answers were vague and rehearsed. She also noticed the car. They shared a vehicle tracking system that was supposed to make things convenient. If she needed to know where the car was, she could check the app. If he was running late, she could see how far away he was. It was meant to be helpful. Now, it was evidence. She opened the app one afternoon while he was at work and scrolled through the location history. One address kept appearing over and over again, a renovated office complex on the south side of town. She had never heard him mention it. She decided to follow him. On Wednesday afternoon, she told David she had errands to run. She left the house 30 minutes before he usually came home and drove to a spot 3 blocks away from the office complex. She parked under a tree where she had a clear view of the parking lot entrance. At 4:30, his car pulled in. She watched him park under a metal awning near the front entrance. Her hands gripped the steering wheel. Rain began to fall, light at first, then heavier. The drops drummed against her windshield like a countdown. At 4:45, the door to the building opened. A woman stepped out. She was tall, polished, wearing a sharp gray suit and heels. Her hair was pulled back in a sleek bun. She didn't look like a mistress. She looked like a general. David got out of the car and walked toward her. They didn't hug, didn't kiss. This wasn't a love affair. This was business. He pulled a thick envelope from his jacket and handed it to her. The woman opened it just enough for Natalie to see a logo on the papers inside. A logo she recognized immediately. It was from her company, the consulting firm where she worked. He was giving this woman confidential information about her job, about her clients, about her work. They shook hands. The woman turned and walked back into the building. David got into his car and drove away. Natalie sat frozen in her car. rain pouring down around her. She had expected an affair. She had prepared herself for betrayal. But this was worse. This wasn't just about replacing her. This was about destroying her. She pulled out her phone and took photos until her hands ached. That evening, she made an appointment with a lawyer. Not someone local, someone in the next town over, someone David would never know about. The lawyer's name was Rachel Donnelly. She was in her late 40s, with sharp eyes and a calm demeanor. Natalie sat across from her in a small office that smelled like coffee and old books. She showed Rachel everything: the bank statements, the photos from the printer screen, the pictures of David handing over the envelope. Rachel didn't look shocked. She just nodded, like she had seen this story 1,000 times before. "He's not confused," Rachel said quietly. "He's coordinated." Natalie's throat tightened. "What do I do?" Rachel leaned forward. "First, we need to know what you're working with. Do you remember what your marital property arrangement was when you got married?" Natalie's mind went blank. She honestly couldn't remember. They had signed so many papers at the courthouse. She had been so happy that day, so trusting. "I'll need to check," she said. "Do that," Rachel said, "and bring me a copy of your marriage certificate, any financial documents you can find, and anything that shows his signature." That night, Natalie went through the filing cabinet in the home office. She found the marriage certificate, the mortgage papers, old tax returns, and then, tucked in the back of a folder, she found something else: a power of attorney document, signed years ago when they were organizing their finances after getting married. It gave her broad powers over David's accounts, investments, and vehicles. She stared at the paper, her heart racing. This could change everything. The next day, she took the document to the county clerk's office to verify it was still valid. It was. But when she showed it to Rachel, the lawyer's expression turned serious. "This covers bank accounts, investments, and vehicles," Rachel said. "But the house is different. Real estate transfers require a notarized signature. This power of attorney doesn't have specific language for property transfers. You'll need his actual signature on a deed." Natalie's stomach dropped. The house was worth $650,000. It was almost paid off. It was their most valuable asset. "How do I get that?" she asked. Rachel thought for a moment. Then she pulled out a blank form. "We're going to create a quitclaim deed disguised as an updated homeowner's insurance document. You'll tell him the insurance company needs updated signatures with current property values. Get him to sign here, here, and here." He pointed to 3 lines on the paper. "Then tell him you'll both go to the bank tomorrow to get it notarized, but you'll already have his signature." Natalie took the paper with shaking hands. "What if he reads it?" "Then you'll have a problem," Rachel said honestly. "But if he's distracted, if he's in a hurry, if he thinks it's routine, he might just sign." That night, Natalie rehearsed in the car 15 times before going inside. Her hands were sweating. Her heart was pounding. She walked into the kitchen where David was checking his phone. "Hey," she said, keeping her voice casual. "The insurance company sent an updated policy for the house. Can you sign it real quick? We need to go to the bank tomorrow to get it notarized." He looked up. "What's it for?" "Just updating the property value for coverage. We renovated the basement last year, remember? It increased the home's value." He took the paper and started reading. Her pulse skyrocketed. Sweat formed on the back of her neck. He frowned. "Wait, this part here says—" His phone rang. The screen lit up. "Vanessa," he answered immediately. "I need to take this." He grabbed a pen, signed all 3 lines without finishing reading, and walked out of the room, phone pressed to his ear. Natalie stood frozen, holding the signed document. Her legs were shaking. She sat down on the kitchen floor and breathed deeply for the first time in 5 minutes. She had done it. Victory number 1. The signed document sat in Natalie's locked desk drawer like a time bomb waiting to detonate. She had photocopied it 3 times, stored the original in a fireproof safe, and sent digital copies to Rachel Donnelly and to her own private email account. Every time she walked past the desk, Her heart rate spiked. David had signed away his claim to their house without realizing it. The house he thought he was going to take from her. The house worth $650,000 that was now, legally, hers alone. But she couldn't celebrate yet. One signature didn't mean safety. It meant she had won a single battle in a war that was far from over. And she knew David well enough to understand that he wouldn't stop. Whatever he was planning with that woman Vanessa, whatever scheme they had constructed together, it was still moving forward. She could feel it, the pressure in the air before a storm breaks. Rachel had warned her during their second meeting. They sat in the same small office, rain streaking down the windows outside. Rachel placed a yellow legal pad on the desk between them and drew 2 columns. "Listen carefully," Rachel said, her voice steady and matter-of-fact. "Right now, you're ahead. You have the house. You have documentation of his suspicious activity. You have photos of him passing confidential information. But he doesn't know you know any of this. That's your advantage. The moment he realizes you're onto him, everything changes. He'll move faster. He'll get more aggressive. He might try to drain accounts, hide assets, or file for divorce before you're ready." Natalie nodded, her throat tight. "So, what do I do?" "You move carefully," Rachel said. "And you move quickly. We need to secure as much as possible before he notices. The joint checking account. How much is in there?" "About $47,000. Start withdrawing it. Slowly. Small amounts over the next 2 weeks. 500 here, 800 there. Nothing large enough to trigger alerts. Deposit everything into a new account at a different bank. In your name only. Won't he notice?" "Eventually, yes. But if you're smart about it, you can drain most of it before he does. And when he asks, you tell him you've been doing shopping, paying bills, buying gas, normal expenses. Make it boring. Make it believable." Natalie wrote everything down, her hand trembling slightly. "What about the investment accounts?" Rachel tapped her pen against the legal pad. "The power of attorney you found covers those. We can transfer them without his signature. But we need to do it all at once, and we need to do it at the right moment. Too early, and he might have time to fight it. Too late, and he might freeze everything first. When is the right moment?" Rachel looked at her directly. "When you're certain he's about to make his move. When you see him preparing to file or trying to access accounts or pressuring you to sign something major. That's when we act. Fast and final." Natalie left the office that day with a checklist written in Rachel's neat handwriting. Withdraw cash gradually. Open new account at different bank. Gather all financial documents. Monitor his movements. Document everything. Stay calm. Don't confront. Wait for the right moment. She started that same afternoon. The first withdrawal was $450 from an ATM near the grocery store. She deposited it into a new account she had opened at a credit union across town. The account was in her name alone. No joint access, no shared statements, just hers. The second withdrawal was $600 2 days later. Then $825. Then $550. She varied the amounts. She varied the locations. She made sure each withdrawal looked random, like normal spending. By the end of the first week, she had moved nearly $6,000. David didn't notice. But on the 8th day, he did something that made her blood run cold. It was 2 in the morning when she woke up to use the bathroom. The house was dark and silent. But as she walked down the hallway, she saw light coming from under the door of the home office. Faint, bluish, the glow of a computer screen. She stopped, her bare feet silent on the hardwood floor. She moved closer to the door, her heart pounding. Through the crack, she could see David sitting at the desk, his face illuminated by the monitor. He was scrolling through something. Bank statements, she realized. He was checking their accounts. She held her breath, terrified he would hear her. But he was too focused on the screen. His jaw was tight, his eyes narrowed. He clicked through several pages, then leaned back in the chair and ran a hand through his hair. He knew something was off. He hadn't figured it out yet, but he knew. Natalie backed away silently and returned to the bedroom. She climbed into bed and lay completely still, staring at the ceiling, listening. 10 minutes later, she heard the office door open, footsteps in the hallway. David appeared in the doorway, his silhouette backlit by the hallway light. "What are you doing awake?" he asked, his voice sharp. She turned her head slowly, pretending to be groggy. "Went to get water. What about you?" "Checking work emails." He stood there for a moment longer, watching her. Then he climbed into bed beside her. She could feel the tension radiating off him. He didn't believe her, and she didn't believe him. The next morning, over coffee, he asked the question she had been dreading. "Did you make any big purchases this week?" Her hand tightened around her mug. "Why?" "No reason. Just noticed the checking account balance is lower than usual." She kept her voice perfectly calm. "I did the grocery shopping. Filled up both cars. Gas prices are insane right now." "Why? Is something wrong?" No. He shook his head, but his eyes didn't leave her face. "Just checking." She smiled. "Okay, let me know if you need me to cut back on anything." He didn't respond, just took another sip of coffee and looked away. She knew she was running out of time. He was starting to watch, starting to question. She needed to move faster. That afternoon, she went to the county clerk's office under the pretense of picking up certified copies of their marriage certificate for insurance purposes. While she was there, she asked the clerk a casual question. "Has my husband been in recently? I thought he mentioned needing some documents notarized." The clerk, a woman in her 60s with kind eyes, checked the computer. "Actually, yes. He was here about 3 weeks ago. Asked about spousal signature requirements for property transfers. Wanted to know if someone could bring in documents that their spouse had already signed and get them notarized later." Natalie's stomach dropped. "What did you tell him?" "I explained that both parties need to be present for notarization on legal documents like that, unless there's a valid power of attorney with specific language." The clerk looked up. "Is everything all right?" "Oh, yes." Natalie forced a smile. "Just making sure we're doing everything correctly. Thank you." She walked out of the building feeling like the ground was tilting beneath her feet. David had been researching how to forge her signature, how to transfer property without her knowledge. He wasn't just planning to leave her. He was planning to rob her. A week later, everything came to a head. David came home on a Thursday evening carrying a leather folder. He set it on the kitchen table with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I found something amazing," he said. "We can refinance the house. The interest rates are way lower than what we're paying now. Our monthly payment would drop almost in half." Natalie picked up the folder and opened it. Her trained eyes scanned the documents quickly. This wasn't a refinancing application. It was a home equity line of credit. $280,000, using their house, her house, as collateral. If she signed this, she would be legally responsible for a massive debt while he drained the money and disappeared. "This is a lot of money," she said carefully. "Let me have my accountant look at it first." His expression hardened. "Your accountant? Since when do you have an accountant?" "Since I inherited money from my aunt last year. You suggested I keep things organized, remember?" It was a lie. Her aunt was alive and well. But David didn't know that, and the mention of inherited money made him pause. She could see the gears turning in his head. If she had inheritance money he didn't know about, he needed to be more careful. "Right," he said slowly. "Of course. But this rate expires soon. We need to move fast. I'll show it to him Monday. We can talk then." He tried to argue, tried to pressure, said the bank needed an answer by the end of the week, but she held firm. "Monday," she repeated. That night, she sent him a formal text message. Professional. Clear. "After careful review, I'm not comfortable signing the home equity line of credit. I prefer to keep our financial situation as it is." He read it, didn't respond. She knew what was coming next. 3 days later, on a rainy Monday morning, a courier knocked on her door. She signed for a thick envelope and opened it with shaking hands. Emergency motion to freeze all marital assets. Filed by David Harper. claiming his wife was hiding money and transferring assets in anticipation of divorce proceedings, requesting immediate court intervention to protect his financial interests. She read the document twice. Her hands were trembling, but then, slowly, she smiled. He was too late. She called Rachel immediately. He filed to freeze everything. When? This morning. The motion is dated today. There was a pause. Then Rachel's voice came back, calm and focused. Good. That means we're clear. Everything we transferred was done before he made any legal claim. Get to my office now. Bring every financial document you have. It's time to move. Natalie grabbed her emergency folder from the locked drawer, threw on a jacket, and drove to Rachel's office. They spent the next 4 hours systematically transferring everything. Using the valid power of attorney, they moved all investment accounts into the name of Jennifer Bradford, Natalie's closest and most trusted friend since college. Jennifer had agreed to hold the assets temporarily until the legal situation was resolved. They transferred the two vehicles using the same power of attorney, and using the quitclaim deed that David had unknowingly signed, they officially transferred the house into Natalie's name alone. Everything was documented. Everything was legal. Everything was time-stamped and notarized before David's motion to freeze assets was even filed. By the time they finished, David Harper legally owned almost nothing. The only money he had managed to secure was the $52,000 he had pressured her to authorize weeks earlier. The money she had reluctantly approved while he pressured her on the phone, making her feel guilty for questioning him. Rachel leaned back in her chair and looked at Natalie with something like respect. You just pulled off one of the cleanest asset protections I've ever seen. But Natalie didn't feel victorious. She felt exhausted. She felt betrayed. She felt like the man she married had died and been replaced by a stranger who wanted to destroy her. What happens now? She asked. Now we wait for the court hearing on his motion. And when we get there, we show the judge exactly what kind of man your husband really is. The hearing was scheduled for 2 weeks later. Natalie spent those 2 weeks gathering every piece of evidence she had. Bank statements showing the mysterious HBR consulting charges, photos of David with Vanessa, the screenshot of the asset division spreadsheet from the printer history, the testimony from the county clerk about his questions regarding forged signatures, records showing attempted logins to her personal bank accounts, all coming from their home IP address during times when only David was there. She also did something else, something Rachel didn't know about. She hired a private investigator. His name was Marcus Webb, former police detective, now private. He was in his 50s, with graying hair and eyes that missed nothing. She gave him everything she knew about Vanessa Pierce, the office complex where she worked, the times David met with her, the envelope exchanges. Marcus called her 5 days later. You need to sit down for this. She was in her car, parked outside a coffee shop. I'm sitting. Vanessa Pierce isn't a financial consultant. She's a con artist. She's been involved in at least 3 similar schemes in the past 7 years. She targets middle-aged men going through life crises, married men with assets. She gains their trust, convinces them their wives are holding them back, and helps them plan asset transfers and divorces. Then she takes a cut of whatever they manage to secure and disappears. Natalie's hands gripped the steering wheel. How much does she usually take? Anywhere from $50,000 to $500,000, depending on what the mark has access to. In your husband's case, she was probably after the house. $650,000, almost paid off, would set her up for years. Does David know that she's scamming him? No. Marcus's voice was certain. Guys like your husband never know until it's too late. They think she believes in them, thinks they're special. By the time they realize the truth, she's gone, and they're left holding nothing. Natalie closed her eyes. Part of her felt sick. Another part felt something darker, something like satisfaction. Can you testify to this in court? She asked. I can present my findings, yes. I have documentation going back years. police reports from other states, witness statements. She's good at covering her tracks, but she's not invisible. Send everything to my lawyer." The night before the hearing, Natalie couldn't sleep. She lay in the guest bedroom, the one she had been using since David moved his things to the master suite, and stared at the ceiling. Tomorrow, everything would come out. Tomorrow, the judge would see the evidence. Tomorrow, David would realize he had been caught. She thought about their wedding day, 9 years ago. She had worn a simple white dress. He had cried when she walked down the aisle. They had danced until midnight. She had believed, truly believed, that they would grow old together. How had it come to this? How had love turned into lies? How had partnership turned into warfare? She didn't have answers, only evidence, only documentation, only the cold, hard proof that the man she married had tried to destroy her. At 7 in the morning, she got up, showered, and put on a navy blue suit, professional, composed. She looked at herself in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. She looked older, harder, but also stronger. Rachel picked her up at 8. They drove to the courthouse in silence. When they arrived, David was already there with his lawyer, a woman in her 40s with sharp features and an expensive briefcase. David wore a new suit. His hair was freshly cut. He looked like a man who thought he was about to win. They entered the courtroom. The judge was a stern-looking man in his 60s, with silver hair and reading glasses perched on his nose. He looked over the motion David had filed, then at the stack of documents Rachel placed on the table. "This is quite a substantial filing, Mrs. Donnelly," the judge said. "Yes, Your Honor. We have significant evidence to present." The hearing began. David's lawyer went first, painting Natalie as a deceptive wife who had secretly moved assets to hide them from her husband. She talked about the power of attorney being used inappropriately, about transfers made without David's knowledge, about Natalie acting in bad faith. Then it was Rachel's turn. She started with the timeline, showed that every single transfer Natalie made was completed days before David filed his motion, proved with notarized timestamps that nothing was done after his legal claim. Everything was legal. Everything was preemptive. Everything was done to protect herself from a husband who was actively planning to rob her. Then she presented the evidence of David's scheme. The bank statements showing payments to the fake consulting company. The photos of him handing confidential documents to Vanessa. The printer history showing the asset division spreadsheet he had created weeks before filing for any legal separation. The testimony from the county clerk about his questions regarding signature forgery. The courtroom went silent. David's face turned white. His lawyer looked at him with an expression of pure betrayal. She hadn't known. He had lied to her too. Then Rachel played her final card. She called Marcus Webb to the stand. He presented his findings about Vanessa Pierce, her history, her pattern, her targets. He showed police reports from other states, testimonies from other men she had scammed, photos of her using different names in different cities. The judge leaned forward, his expression darkening. "Mr. Harper, did you know about any of this?" David opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. She told me she was a consultant. She said she was helping me." "Helping you do what, exactly?" The judge interrupted. David didn't answer. The judge removed his glasses and set them on the bench. "Let me see if I understand this correctly. You attempted to consolidate your wife's assets. You tried to get her to sign a home equity line of credit for $280,000. You researched forging her signature at the county clerk's office. You created an asset division spreadsheet. You passed confidential information from her employer to a known con artist. And then, when your wife protected herself legally and properly, you filed an emergency motion accusing her of hiding assets. Is that accurate?" David's lawyer put a hand on his arm, but he shook it off. "She was working with someone. I know she was. The transfers were too perfect, too coordinated. She was working with an attorney," the judge said coldly, "which is exactly what any reasonable person would do when they discovered their spouse was planning to defraud them. He looked down at the documents in front of him. Then he looked at Natalie. "Mrs. Harper, I'm going to ask you directly. Did you transfer any assets after your husband filed his motion to freeze?" "No, Your Honor," Natalie said clearly. "Everything was completed before he made any legal claim." The judge nodded. Then he delivered his ruling. All assets would remain with Natalie. The transfers were legal and properly executed. David's motion to freeze was denied. Furthermore, David was ordered to return the $52,000 he had withdrawn from their emergency fund. He was responsible for all court costs and legal fees for both parties. The secret debt he had accumulated, the $85,000 he had been hiding from Natalie for 2 years, was determined to be his sole responsibility. Divorce granted. Asset division 0 for David Harper. The gavel came down. David sat frozen in his chair. His lawyer gathered her papers and left without another word. Rachel squeezed Natalie's hand under the table. It was over. The courtroom emptied slowly. People filed out in quiet murmurs, their shoes clicking against the polished floor. Natalie sat perfectly still in her chair, her hands folded in her lap, watching as David and his lawyer spoke in hushed, tense voices near the exit. His lawyer's face was rigid, with barely contained anger. She had been lied to, manipulated, used. She stabbed her finger toward the door twice, clearly telling him to leave, then turned and walked away without looking back. David stood alone in the hallway visible through the courtroom doors. His shoulders sagged. His new suit suddenly looked too big on him, like he had shrunk inside it. He glanced back toward the courtroom, and for just a second, his eyes met Natalie's. She didn't look away. He held his gaze, her expression calm and empty. There was no anger there, no satisfaction, no pain, just nothing, like she was looking at a stranger she had once known in another lifetime. He turned and walked away. Rachel touched Natalie's arm gently. "You okay?" Natalie nodded slowly. "I think so. You did everything right. You protected yourself. You were smart and careful, and you didn't let emotion cloud your judgment. That's rare." "I don't feel smart," Natalie said quietly. "I feel tired. That's normal. This kind of betrayal, it takes something from you, but you'll heal, and you'll be stronger for it." Rachel gathered her papers into a briefcase. "He has 30 days to return the $52,000. If he doesn't, we can garnish his wages. We can put liens on anything he tries to acquire. He won't be able to hide." Natalie stood up, smoothing her skirt. "Do you think he'll try?" "Honestly, I think he's too broken right now to try anything. He just lost everything. His wife, his home, his money, his reputation, and he's starting to realize he was played by Vanessa just as much as he tried to play you." Rachel paused. "Men like David don't recover from this quickly, if at all." They walked out of the courthouse together into the bright October afternoon. The air was crisp and cool, carrying the smell of fallen leaves and approaching winter. Natalie stood on the steps, breathing deeply, feeling the sunlight on her face. Her phone buzzed. A text from Jennifer Bradford, her friend who had agreed to temporarily hold the assets. "Heard the news from Rachel. I'm so proud of you. Want to come over tonight? Wine and terrible movies?" Natalie smiled. It was the first genuine smile she had felt in weeks. "Yes, I'll bring ice cream." But first, she had something else she needed to do. She drove to the office complex on the south side of town, the same building where she had watched David meet with Vanessa weeks earlier. She parked in the same spot across the street, but this time she wasn't hiding. This time she walked straight through the front doors. The lobby was modern and clean, with marble floors and a directory on the wall. She scanned the list of businesses. 3rd floor, Suite 312, HBR Consulting. She took the elevator up. The hallway was quiet, lined with office doors bearing professional nameplates. She found Suite 312 at the end of the hall. The door was plain, no window, just a number and a small sign that read HBR Consulting by appointment only. She tried the handle. Locked. She knocked. No answer. She knocked again. Harder this time. Still nothing. A door opened behind her. A man in his 30s, wearing a polo shirt and khakis, poked his head out. "You looking for the consultant?" "Yes," Natalie said. "Do you know when she'll be back?" The man shrugged. "She cleared out 3 days ago. Lease was month to month. She paid through the end of October and left. Didn't even take the furniture. Just packed up her files and disappeared. 3 days ago. Right around the time David filed his motion to freeze assets. Right around the time Vanessa must have realized her scheme was falling apart." "Did she say where she was going?" Natalie asked, even though she already knew the answer. "Nope, didn't say much of anything. Just shook my hand, wished me well, and left." He looked at Natalie curiously. "She owe you money or something?" "Something like that." The man shook his head. "Yeah, you're probably not the first. She seemed too smooth, you know? Too polished. I never trusted her, but she paid her rent on time, so..." He shrugged again. "Sorry, I can't help more." "It's okay. Thank you." Natalie walked back to the elevator, her mind churning. Vanessa was gone. Disappeared into whatever new city, whatever new identity, whatever new scheme she had lined up next. David would never see her again. Would never get back the money he had given her. Would never hear the apology he probably desperately wanted. Good. Let him live with that. Let him understand what it felt like to trust someone completely and have them vanish like smoke. She drove home, the home that was now entirely hers, and pulled into the driveway. The house looked the same as it always had. White siding, black shutters, a small front porch with 2 rocking chairs that nobody ever used. But it felt different now, lighter somehow, like a weight had been lifted from the walls. She unlocked the front door and stepped inside. The silence wasn't oppressive anymore. It was peaceful. She walked through the rooms slowly, really looking at them for the first time in months. The living room with its outdated couch. The kitchen with the countertops she had always wanted to replace. The hallway with family photos she would need to take down eventually. She stopped in front of one photo. Their 5th anniversary. They were on a beach somewhere in California. David had his arm around her waist. She was laughing at something he had said. They looked happy. They had been happy. What happened? When did it start to break? Was it gradual, like she had always believed? Or was there a specific moment when David decided she wasn't enough anymore? When he decided he deserved more? When he started listening to Vanessa's poison? She would never know. And maybe that was okay. Maybe some questions didn't need answers. She took the photo off the wall and placed it face down in a drawer. Not ready to throw it away yet, but not ready to look at it either. Her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. "Hello? Natalie Harper?" A woman's voice. Professional. Crisp. "Yes? This is Detective Sarah Brennan with the County Fraud Division. I'm calling about a case involving Vanessa Pierce. I understand you recently had dealings with her?" Natalie's heart skipped. "Yes. She was involved in a scheme with my husband. Or my ex-husband, I guess. We just finalized the divorce today." "I'm sorry to hear that. Would you be willing to come in and give a statement? We're building a case against Ms. Pierce. She's been operating under several aliases across multiple states. The more evidence we can gather, the better chance we have of tracking her down." "Of course. When do you need me? Would tomorrow morning work? Say, 10 o'clock? I'll be there." Natalie hung up and sat down at the kitchen table. Vanessa was being investigated. There was a chance, however small, that she would face consequences for what she had done. Not just to David, but to all the other men she had scammed over the years, all the other families she had destroyed. It wouldn't undo the damage, wouldn't bring back the trust, wouldn't erase the betrayal, but it was something. A small piece of justice in an unjust situation. That evening, she went to Jennifer's house as planned. Jennifer lived in a cozy townhouse across town, filled with plants and warm lighting and furniture that actually matched. She opened the door with a bottle of wine already in hand and pulled Natalie into a fierce hug. "You absolute legend," Jennifer said into her hair. "I can't believe you pulled that off." "I had help," Natalie said, her voice muffled against Jennifer's shoulder. "Yeah, but you had the guts to do it in the first place. Most people would have just confronted him, yelled, cried, hoped he'd change. You documented everything and took him apart piece by piece." Jennifer pulled back and looked at her seriously. "I'm so proud of you, and I'm so sorry you had to go through it." They settled on the couch with wine and ice cream and a terrible romantic comedy that neither of them really watched. Jennifer did most of the talking, filling the silence with stories about work and her ridiculous neighbor and the guy she had gone on a date with, who spent the entire evening talking about his fantasy football team. Natalie listened, grateful for the normalcy, for the reminder that life existed outside of courtrooms and lawyers and betrayal, that there were still people who cared about her, who wanted nothing from her except her company. Halfway through the second movie, Jennifer muted the television and turned to face her. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Do you still love him?" Natalie was quiet for a long moment, swirling the wine in her glass. Did she still love David? The David she married 9 years ago? Yes. That man had been kind and funny and supportive. That man had held her when she cried and celebrated her successes and made her feel safe. But that David was gone. Maybe he had never really existed at all. Maybe she had loved an idea of him, a version of him that he had performed for her until he got tired of performing. "I don't know," she said finally. "I love who I thought he was. But that person isn't real. The real David is someone who tried to rob me, who worked with a con artist to take everything I had, who researched forging my signature. I don't love that person. I don't even know that person." Jennifer nodded. "That's fair. And it's okay to grieve for the person you thought he was, even if he wasn't real." "I think I already have been grieving," Natalie said, "for months now. Every time I noticed something off, every time he lied, every time he chose her over me, without me even knowing there was a choice being made. I've been mourning this marriage for a long time." "Then maybe this is the end of the mourning," Jennifer said gently. "Maybe now you get to start healing." Natalie hoped she was right. The next morning she met with Detective Brennan at the police station. The detective was a tall black woman in her early 40s, with sharp eyes and a firm handshake. She led Natalie to a small interview room and pulled out a recorder. "I'm going to record this, if that's okay with you, just for documentation purposes." "That's fine." Detective Brennan pressed record and stated the date, time, and names of everyone present. Then she looked at Natalie. "Tell me everything you know about Vanessa Pierce." Natalie told her. About the first time she saw the name on the bank statements. About following David to the office complex. About the envelope with her company's logo. About Marcus Webb's investigation. And what he had discovered about Vanessa's history. Detective Brennan took notes, nodding occasionally. When Natalie finished, the detective sat back in her chair. "We've been tracking Ms. Pierce for about 18 months. She's good. Very good. She changes her name, her appearance, her location. She never stays in one place long enough for us to build a solid case. But she's getting sloppy. This thing with your husband, using a fake company with a traceable name, that was a mistake. And the fact that she left physical evidence behind in that office suite, it gives us something to work with. Do you think you'll catch her?" "Eventually, yes. People like her always slip up. They get greedy or lazy or overconfident. And when they do, we'll be waiting." Detective Brennan leaned forward. "In the meantime, I want you to know that what she did to you and your husband, it's not your fault. She's a professional. This is what she does. She finds vulnerable people and exploits them." "My husband wasn't vulnerable," Natalie said, and she was surprised by the bitterness in her own voice. "He was selfish. He chose to believe her. He chose to betray me." "Both things can be true," the detective said quietly. "He made terrible choices, and he's facing the consequences. But she's still a predator, and predators are good at finding prey." Natalie didn't respond to that. She didn't want to feel sympathy for David, didn't want to make excuses for him. He had made his choices. He could live with them. She left the police station feeling drained. The past few weeks had been a constant cycle of stress and adrenaline and fear. Now that it was over, now that the court case was finished, and the evidence was documented, and the divorce was final, she felt empty. Like she had been running on fumes for so long that she didn't know how to function without the constant pressure. She drove aimlessly for a while, no destination in mind. Eventually, she found herself at a small park near the river. She parked and walked down to the water's edge. The October sun was warm on her face. Leaves crunched under her feet. A few ducks paddled near the shore, oblivious to human drama. She sat on a bench and watched the water flow past. Constant, steady, indifferent. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "I need to talk to you. Please. It's important. David." She stared at the message. Her first instinct was to delete it, to block the number, to maintain the distance she had worked so hard to create. But something made her hesitate. She typed back, "What do you want?" The response came quickly. To explain, to apologize. "I know I don't deserve it, but please, just 10 minutes. I'll meet you anywhere you want, somewhere public. I just need you to hear me." She almost said no. Almost told him there was nothing he could say that would change anything. But then she thought about closure, about looking him in the eye one more time and hearing whatever pathetic excuse he had prepared. Maybe she needed it. Maybe she needed to see him broken and desperate so she could finally let go of the man she thought she had married. "Riverside Coffee House," she typed. "Tomorrow at 2 in the afternoon. You have 15 minutes. Not a second more." It was petty, choosing that coffee shop, the place where it had all started, the $7.50 that had unraveled his entire scheme. But she didn't care. Let him sit in the place where his lies began. Let him feel the weight of his mistakes in the exact spot where he had first slipped up. "Thank you," he responded. "I'll be there." She put her phone away and looked back at the river. Tomorrow she would face him one last time. Tomorrow she would hear whatever he had to say. And then, finally, she would be done. But tonight, she was going to go home to her house, order takeout, and watch mindless television until she fell asleep on the couch. Tonight, she was going to let herself just exist, without planning or strategizing or protecting herself. Tonight, she was going to rest. She stood up from the bench and walked back to her car. The sun was starting to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. It was beautiful. She had forgotten to notice beautiful things over the past few months, had been too focused on survival to appreciate simple moments. That was going to change. Starting now. Starting tonight. She drove home with the windows down, letting the cool air wash over her. When she pulled into the driveway, she noticed something on the front porch. A small package, wrapped in brown paper. She approached it carefully, her guard immediately up. But there was no sender address. No markings, just her name written in unfamiliar handwriting. She picked it up. It was light. She shook it gently. Something soft inside. She unlocked the door, went inside, and set the package on the kitchen table. She studied it for a moment, then carefully unwrapped it. Inside was a small velvet box. She opened it. A necklace. Simple, elegant. A thin gold chain with a small pendant in the shape of a compass. There was a note tucked underneath. She unfolded it with shaking hands. "For finding your way when you were lost, for being brave when you were scared, for protecting yourself when no one else would. You're stronger than you know. Jennifer." It had to be Jennifer. Natalie's eyes filled with tears. Not sad tears, not angry tears, just tears of gratitude, of relief, of the overwhelming realization that even though one person had betrayed her, others still loved her, still believed in her, still saw her worth. She put the necklace on, the small compass resting just above her heart. Then she pulled out her phone and sent Jennifer a text. "Thank you for everything. I love you. The response came immediately. Love you too. You're going to be okay. Better than okay. You're going to be amazing. Natalie smiled through her tears and looked around her kitchen. Her house, her space, her future. Jennifer was right. She was going to be okay. No, better than okay. She was going to be free. Natalie woke up the next morning to sunlight streaming through the bedroom windows. She had forgotten to close the curtains the night before, too exhausted to care. Now the golden October light filled the room, warm and gentle. She lay still for a moment, her hand reaching automatically to the pendant at her throat. The small compass Jennifer had sent her. A reminder that she had found her way through the darkness. She checked her phone. 11:30 in the morning. She had slept for almost 12 hours. Her body had finally allowed itself to rest now that the immediate danger was over. Now that the court battle was won. Now that David legally had no claim to anything she owned. But at 2 o'clock this afternoon, she would see him again. One last time. At Riverside Coffee House. The place where a $7.50 charge had started everything. She got out of bed slowly, her muscles stiff from tension she had been carrying for weeks. She showered, letting the hot water ease the knots in her shoulders and back. She dressed carefully, jeans and a simple cream-colored sweater. Comfortable, but put together. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She just wanted to feel like herself. By 1:30, she was in her car, driving toward the coffee shop. Her heart was beating faster than normal, but her hands were steady on the wheel. She had faced him in court. She had watched him lose everything. This was just a conversation. 15 minutes. Then it would truly be over. The Riverside Coffee House was a small, independent cafe, tucked between a bookstore and a yoga studio. It had large windows facing the street, wooden tables inside, and a chalkboard menu on the wall. Natalie had never been here before, despite it being only 10 minutes from her house. She had never needed to, until the bank statement showed her that David had. She parked across the street and checked the time. 1:55. She took a deep breath, grabbed her purse, and walked inside. The cafe smelled like coffee and cinnamon. Soft music played overhead. A few people sat scattered at tables, working on laptops or reading books. And there, in the corner by the window, was David. He looked terrible. His face was drawn and pale, with dark circles under his eyes that makeup couldn't hide. He had lost weight. His clothes hung loose on his frame. When he saw her, he stood up quickly, nervously, like a guilty child called to the principal's office. "Natalie, thank you for coming. I didn't think you would." She didn't respond, just walked to the table and sat down across from him. She placed her phone on the table between them, screen up, where she could see the time. 15 minutes, she said. "Starting now." He nodded and sat back down. His hands were shaking. He wrapped them around a coffee cup that was already empty, probably cold. He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. "I don't know where to start," he said finally. "The beginning is usually good," Natalie said, her voice flat. "Or maybe the part where you decided to try to rob me. That seems like an important detail." He flinched. "I never meant for it to go that far. I swear, Natalie, it wasn't supposed to be like this." "Then what was it supposed to be like, David? Walk me through it. What was the plan?" He looked down at his hands. "I got into trouble. About 2 years ago, I made an investment, a business opportunity that a friend told me about. It seemed solid, guaranteed returns. I put in $85,000, money from a savings account you didn't know about, money I had been setting aside." "You had a secret savings account?" Natalie's voice was sharp. "Just for emergencies. I didn't think it was a big deal. We each had our own money before we got married, and I just kept some of mine separate. I thought I was being smart. Protecting us!" He laughed bitterly. "Turns out I was being an idiot. The investment failed. Worse, it was a scam. The whole thing. The company disappeared. The friend who told me about it lost money too. We tried to get lawyers involved, but there was nothing to recover. The money was just gone. And I was left with this massive debt and no way to tell you about it without admitting I had been hiding money from you for years. Natalie felt a cold anger building in her chest. So instead of being honest with me, instead of telling your wife that you made a mistake and needed help, you decided to destroy me? No! David's voice cracked. I didn't know what to do. I was terrified you would leave me, that you would think I was worthless, stupid, a failure. I started having panic attacks at work, couldn't sleep. I felt like I was drowning and there was no way out. And then you met Vanessa. He closed his eyes. Yes, tell me about that. He was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was barely above a whisper. I met her at a networking event last spring. She was charming, confident. She seemed genuinely interested in what I had to say. We started talking regularly, just professional stuff at first. She gave me advice about work, about investments, about life. She made me feel important, like I mattered. I made you feel like you mattered, Natalie said, her voice hard. For 9 years. I know you did, but I was so deep in my own shame and fear that I couldn't see it. Vanessa knew exactly what to say. She told me I was being held back, that I deserved more, that my potential was being wasted, and I believed her because it felt good to believe her. When did she suggest the divorce? David's face crumbled. About 4 months ago. She said she had seen situations like mine before, that the only way out was to start fresh, to liquidate assets, pay off my debt, and build something new. She said she would help me, that we could be partners, that she saw potential in me that no one else did. And you believed her. Yes, God help me, yes. She made it sound so reasonable, so fair. She said you would be fine, that you had your own career, your own money, that you didn't need me financially. She made me believe I was doing the right thing, the smart thing. He looked up at Natalie with red-rimmed eyes. I was so stupid, so incredibly stupid. Yes, you were. Natalie's voice was ice. But stupid doesn't excuse what you did. You didn't just plan to divorce me, David. You tried to forge my signature. You stole confidential information from my company to give to her. You created spreadsheets dividing up our assets before you even told me you wanted out. You weren't leaving me. You were robbing me. I know. Tears ran down his face now. I know, and I hate myself for it. Every single day I wake up, and I can't believe what I did. What I became. I destroyed the best thing in my life because I was too much of a coward to be honest with you. Natalie checked her phone. 7 minutes had passed. 8 minutes left. Where is she now? She asked. Vanessa. David wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. Gone. I tried calling her the day after the court hearing. Her number was disconnected. I went to her office. Empty. I checked her social media. All the accounts were deleted. She vanished like she never existed. She exists, Natalie said. Just not as the person she pretended to be. The police are looking for her. She's a professional con artist. She's done this to other men in other states. You weren't special to her, David. You were a mark, a target. She saw a vulnerable, insecure man with assets, and she played you perfectly. He closed his eyes in pain. I gave her almost $70,000 over the past 6 months. The money I pressured you to authorize, plus cash withdrawals I made. She said it was for business setup costs, for legal fees, for investments. I just kept giving her money because I thought she believed in me. She believed in your bank account, Natalie said coldly. That's all she ever believed in. They sat in silence for a moment. The coffee shop continued around them. People ordering drinks, quiet conversations, the hiss of the espresso machine. Normal life happening while theirs had imploded. What happens now? David asked finally. The judge ordered me to repay the $52,000 I took from our emergency fund. I don't have it, Natalie. I'm broke. I'm living in a motel. My credit cards are maxed out. I'm trying to get extra shifts at work, but I still owe $85,000 on that original debt. And now I owe you $52,000, and I have legal fees from the divorce and I just don't know how I'm going to survive this." Natalie felt nothing. No pity, no sympathy, no urge to help or fix or save him. He had made these choices. He could live with the consequences. "That's not my problem anymore," she said simply. I know it's not. I'm not asking you to help me. I'm not asking you for money or forgiveness or anything except to hear me say, I'm sorry. I am so sorry, Natalie. I'm sorry for lying. I'm sorry for betraying you. I'm sorry for trying to take everything from you. I'm sorry for throwing away our marriage. I'm sorry for being too weak and too scared and too selfish to be the husband you deserved." His voice broke completely. "You deserved so much better than me." "Yes," Natalie said. "I did." She checked her phone again. 14 minutes. 1 minute left. She looked at him across the table. This man who had been her husband, who had shared her bed and her life and her dreams for 9 years. He looked broken, destroyed, a shell of the person he used to be. Part of her, a very small part, felt sad. Not for him, but for them. For what they could have been if he had made different choices, if he had trusted her, if he had been honest, if he had valued their partnership more than his pride. But mostly, she felt nothing. The love she had felt for him had burned away over weeks of lies and betrayal and strategic maneuvering. What was left was ash, empty, gone. "I need you to understand something," she said, her voice steady and clear. "I didn't destroy you, David. You destroyed yourself. I simply protected myself from being destroyed with you. Every move I made, every transfer, every document, every strategy, it was all defensive. I wasn't attacking you. I was surviving you. I know. You created this situation. You welcomed Vanessa into our marriage. You chose to believe her lies over our life together. You made the spreadsheets. You researched the forgery. You tried to trap me with that home equity line of credit. You filed the motion to freeze assets. And when it all fell apart, when you lost everything, that was the consequence of your own actions, not mine." "I know," he whispered again. "Good." She stood up and picked up her phone. "Your 15 minutes are up." He looked up at her desperately. "Is there any chance, any possibility at all, that someday you might forgive me?" She considered the question. Really considered it. Could she forgive him? Maybe. Someday. Years from now, when the wounds had healed and the anger had faded, when she had built a new life so full and rich that this chapter was just a distant memory. But did he deserve to know that? Did he deserve the comfort of thinking she might absolve him? "No, I don't know," she said honestly. "But whether I forgive you or not doesn't change anything. We're done, David. Completely. Finally. Permanently. This is the last time we'll ever speak. After today, you're nothing to me. Not my husband. Not my friend. Not my enemy. Just someone I used to know." He turned to walk away. "Natalie, wait." She paused but didn't turn around. "The 750, he said quietly. "The coffee charge that started everything. I was meeting her here every week, early mornings before work. We would sit right here at this table, and she would tell me I deserved better, that I was capable of more, that you didn't appreciate me the way she did. This is where it all started, where I started believing her instead of believing in us." Natalie turned slowly to look at him one last time. Then, this is also where it ends. She walked out of the coffee shop and into the bright afternoon sunlight. She got in her car, drove 3 blocks, pulled into an empty parking lot, and finally let herself breathe. It was over. Truly over. She had faced him, heard his confession, seen his brokenness, and felt absolutely nothing. She wasn't angry anymore, wasn't hurt, wasn't grieving. She was just done. Her phone buzzed. "Rachel Donnelly. How did it go?" He apologized, explained, cried. "It doesn't change anything." "Good. Don't let him manipulate you into feeling sorry for him. He made his choices." "I know. I won't." Natalie paused. "Rachel, how long does he have to repay the $52,000? 30 days from the court order. If he doesn't pay, we start garnishment proceedings. And if he genuinely doesn't have the money, then we garnish his wages until it's paid. Could take years, but you'll get it eventually. Natalie was quiet for a moment. Let me think about it. I'll call you later this week. She hung up and sat in her car, watching people walk by, living their lives, carrying their own burdens, fighting their own battles. Did she want to spend years tracking down that money? Did she want David's financial destruction to continue indefinitely? Or did she want to just let it go and move forward completely unencumbered? She didn't know yet, but she had time to decide, time to think clearly without panic or pressure or fear, time to choose what was best for her future, not what would hurt him most. That evening, she met Jennifer for dinner at a small Italian restaurant. They sat outside on the patio under string lights and warm heaters. Jennifer ordered wine. Natalie ordered sparkling water. "You okay?" Jennifer asked. "Yeah, I am." It was hard seeing him like that, broken, pathetic, but it was also necessary. I needed to hear him admit what he did. I needed to look him in the eye and feel nothing. And I did. I felt nothing. That's how I know I'm really done. Jennifer reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "I'm so proud of you. You handled this whole nightmare with such grace and strength. You could have fallen apart. Instead, you fought back strategically and won." "I had help," Natalie said. "I couldn't have done it without you, without Rachel, without Marcus. I had people who believed in me when I couldn't believe in myself. That's what we're here for." Jennifer smiled. "So what now? What's next for Natalie Harper?" Natalie leaned back in her chair and looked up at the darkening sky. "I don't know yet. I need to figure out who I am without him. I've been David's wife for 9 years. Before that, I was preparing to be someone's wife. I don't think I've ever just been me." "Then this is your chance," Jennifer said. "Take your time. Travel if you want. Try new hobbies. Date or don't date. Whatever feels right. You have complete freedom now. Use it." Natalie smiled. "Maybe I will." They talked late into the evening, their conversation flowing easily from serious to silly and back again. When they finally left the restaurant, Natalie felt lighter than she had in months, maybe years. She drove home singing along to the radio, something she hadn't done in forever. When she pulled into her driveway, she sat for a moment looking at the house. Her space, her fresh start. She went inside and walked through each room, really seeing them this time. The living room that needed new furniture, the kitchen that could use updated appliances, the guest bedroom she could turn into a home office, or art studio, or library. The possibilities were endless. She made herself tea and sat at the kitchen table with a notebook. At the top of the page, she wrote, "Things I want." She stared at the blank lines below. What did she want? For so long, her life had been about what David wanted, what they wanted as a couple, what made sense for their future together. But now, she was alone. Now she could want things just for herself. She started writing. Travel to places I've never been. Learn to paint. Take a cooking class. Read all the books I've been meaning to read. Redecorate the house exactly how I want it. Make new friends. Try new restaurants. Go to concerts alone. The list grew longer. Small things and big things. Practical things and dream things. She filled 3 pages before she finally set down her pen. She looked at what she had written and felt something unexpected. Excitement. For the first time since this nightmare began, she felt genuinely excited about the future. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Her heart sank, thinking it might be David again. But when she opened it, the message was from Detective Brennan. "Wanted to update you. We tracked Vanessa Pierce to Arizona using financial records. Local PD has issued a warrant. Should have her in custody within 48 hours. Your testimony helped make this possible. Thank you." Natalie stared at the message. Vanessa was going to be arrested, would face charges, would finally be held accountable for all the lives she had damaged. It wouldn't undo what she had done, wouldn't return David's money or anyone else's, but it was justice. Imperfect, incomplete justice, but justice nonetheless. She texted back, "Thank you for letting me know. I hope she faces everything she deserves." She set her phone down and looked at her list again, at all the things she wanted to do and become and experience. David had tried to take everything from her, her money, her home, her security, her future, but he had failed. She still had all of it, and now she had something even more valuable. She had herself back. She stood up, walked to the kitchen window, and looked out at the backyard. The grass needed mowing. The fence needed painting. There was work to do, but it was good work, work that would make this space truly hers. Tomorrow, she would call a contractor about updating the kitchen. She would schedule that trip to the bookstore she had been putting off. She would start checking things off her list. But tonight, she was going to pour herself another cup of tea, curl up on the couch with a blanket, and watch whatever she wanted without considering anyone else's preferences. It was a small thing, a tiny act of independence, but it felt like freedom. 3 weeks passed. 3 weeks of waking up in a house that belonged only to her. 3 weeks of making decisions without consulting anyone. 3 weeks of slowly, carefully, building a life that felt authentic instead of compromised. Natalie had started small. She replaced the living room couch with one she actually liked, a deep blue velvet sectional that David would have hated. She painted the guest bedroom a warm terracotta color and set up an easel by the window. She hadn't painted anything yet, but the possibility was there, waiting for her whenever she was ready. She had dinner with Jennifer twice a week, started attending a book club at the local library, signed up for an Italian cooking class that met every Thursday evening. Small steps toward a social life that was entirely her own. The house felt different now, lighter, like it had been holding its breath for years and could finally exhale. On a cold November afternoon, 3 weeks and 2 days after her final conversation with David, Natalie received a certified letter. She signed for it with a sense of dread, expecting legal documents or complications. But when she opened it, she found something unexpected. A cashier's check for $52,000, the exact amount David had been ordered to repay. There was a note attached, written in handwriting she didn't recognize. "Mrs. Harper, I am David Harper's mother, Margaret. We have never met, though I have heard about you over the years. My son came to me last week and told me everything. What he did, what he lost, what he destroyed. I am heartbroken and ashamed. I raised him to be better than this. I did not raise him to be a liar and a thief. Please accept this repayment. The money comes from me, not from him. He cannot afford it, and likely never will be able to. But you deserve what you are owed. You deserve to move forward without this hanging over you. I am so very sorry for what my son put you through. I hope someday you can find peace. With deepest regret, Margaret Harper." Natalie read the note 3 times, her hands trembling. Margaret, David's mother, a woman she had met exactly twice during their 9-year marriage, because David always said his family was complicated and preferred to keep them at a distance. Now she understood why. He had been hiding things from everyone, not just from her. She sat down at the kitchen table and stared at the check. $52,000. Money she was legally entitled to. Money she had almost decided to let go, because chasing it felt like letting David continue to occupy space in her life. Now, his mother had paid it for him, had given her the closure she needed without requiring anything from David himself. She picked up her phone and called Rachel Donnelly. "I just received a check from David's mother for the full amount he owed." Rachel was quiet for a moment. "That's unusual, but legally, it doesn't matter who pays as long as you're made whole. Do you want to accept it?" Natalie looked at the check again, at the note written by a woman who was clearly carrying her own shame and grief over what her son had become. "Yes," she said, "I do." "Then deposit it. Consider the matter closed. You're done with him, Natalie. Completely and finally done." She hung up and held the check in her hands. Done. The word felt heavy and light at the same time. Heavy with everything it meant. Light with everything it released. She drove to the bank and deposited the check. The teller processed it efficiently, handing her a receipt, $52,000, back where it belonged. As she walked out of the bank, her phone rang. Detective Brennan. Mrs. Harper, I wanted to let you know that Vanessa Pierce was arrested this morning in Phoenix. She's being extradited back here to face multiple counts of fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy. Your testimony, along with testimonies from 4 other victims, built a solid case. She's looking at significant prison time. Natalie stopped walking, standing in the middle of the parking lot. How long? If convicted on all counts, 15 to 20 years, possibly more. She won't be able to do this to anyone else for a very long time. Good, Natalie said, and she meant it. Thank you for telling me. You helped make this happen. You documented everything. You didn't just protect yourself. You helped protect everyone she might have targeted next. You should be proud of that. After she hung up, Natalie sat in her car for a long moment. Vanessa arrested, David's debt repaid, the divorce final, the house secured. Everything was finished, every loose end tied up, every battle won. So why did she still feel like something was missing? That evening, she sat in her newly decorated living room with a cup of tea, the blue velvet couch soft beneath her. She had bought fresh flowers for the coffee table, pale pink roses, like the ones David had brought home that night months ago when he was performing affection. But these were different. These were from her, for her, a reclamation of something that had once felt tainted. She thought about David's mother's note, the shame and regret written in those careful words. Margaret Harper had apologized for her son's actions, had tried to make things right in the only way she could. It was more than David himself had truly offered, even in their final conversation at the coffee shop. Natalie wondered where David was now, what motel room he was living in, whether he had found another job or was drowning in the debt he had created, whether he thought about her, whether he regretted not just what he had lost, but who he had become. She wondered these things, but she didn't care about the answers. That was the difference between grief and indifference. Grief asked questions and desperately needed answers. Indifference asked questions and could walk away without them. She was finally, genuinely indifferent. Her phone buzzed. A text from Jennifer. Emergency wine night needed. My date was a disaster, and I need to complain to someone who will actually listen. Your place in 20 minutes? Natalie smiled and typed back. Doors unlocked. I'll get the glasses. 20 minutes later, Jennifer burst through the front door, carrying 2 bottles of wine and a bag of cheese and crackers. Okay, so picture this, Jennifer said, not even bothering with hello. He spent 45 minutes explaining cryptocurrency to me. 45 minutes, Natalie. I tried to change the subject 6 times. 6. He just kept going. I learned nothing except that I never want to hear the words blockchain or digital wallet ever again. Natalie laughed, a real, genuine laugh that came from somewhere deep in her chest. Did you at least get a free dinner out of it? We split the check because he said it was more egalitarian, which would be fine except he ordered the most expensive steak on the menu, and I had a salad. Jennifer flopped onto the blue couch. I'm done with dating apps. Done. I'm going to become one of those women who has 12 cats and grows herbs on her windowsill and writes angry letters to the editor about local zoning laws. You're allergic to cats. Then I'll get birds. Angry, judgmental birds who scream at me in the morning. It'll still be better than another cryptocurrency, bro. They dissolved into laughter, and for the next 3 hours, they talked about everything and nothing. Jennifer's terrible date. Natalie's Italian cooking class, where she had accidentally set off the fire alarm making carbonara. The new season of a show they both loved. Plans for Thanksgiving. Whether Natalie should cut her hair short or keep growing it long. Normal things. Easy things. things that had nothing to do with divorce or betrayal or legal battles. When Jennifer finally left close to midnight, Natalie cleaned up the wine glasses and cheese plate, turned off the lights, and climbed the stairs to her bedroom. She caught her reflection in the hallway mirror and stopped. She looked different, not just physically, though she had lost weight from stress, and her face was leaner, her eyes clearer. But there was something else, a quality in her expression that hadn't been there before. Strength, maybe, or certainty, or simple peace. She touched the compass pendant at her throat, the gift from Jennifer, for finding your way when you were lost. She had been so lost. For months, maybe years before she even realized it, lost in a marriage that was dying, lost in trust that was misplaced, lost in a version of herself that existed only to accommodate someone else's needs. But she had found her way out, not perfectly, not without scars, but she had done it. The next morning, Saturday, Natalie woke early and made coffee. Real coffee, not the instant kind David had preferred. She took her mug out to the back porch and sat on the steps, watching the sun rise over the neighbor's fence. The air was cold and crisp, carrying the smell of wood smoke from someone's fireplace. November had arrived fully now, bringing shorter days and the promise of winter. The trees in her backyard were nearly bare, their branches stark against the pale sky. She thought about David's request at the coffee shop, whether she could ever forgive him. Could she? Forgiveness was complicated. It didn't mean forgetting. It didn't mean excusing. It didn't mean reconciliation or trust or letting him back into her life in any capacity. Forgiveness, she realized, was about releasing the hold that his betrayal had on her, about choosing not to let his actions define her future, about accepting that he was broken and flawed and human, and that his brokenness was not her responsibility to carry. Could she do that? Maybe. Someday. When enough time had passed, that the wounds were fully healed instead of just scabbed over. But he didn't need to know that. He didn't deserve the comfort of her forgiveness. What he deserved was to live with the consequences of his choices, to rebuild himself from the ground up, to learn whether he was capable of becoming someone better than the man who had tried to destroy her. That was his journey, not hers. Hers was different. Hers was about rediscovering who she was without him, about building a life so full and rich that the years she spent with him would eventually feel like a small chapter in a much longer story. She finished her coffee and went back inside. She had plans today, productive plans. She was meeting with a contractor about the kitchen renovation. Then she had her painting class at the community center. Then dinner with a colleague from work who had become a friend. Her calendar was full. Her life was full. And it was all hers. At 11 o'clock, the contractor arrived. A woman in her 50s named Carol with measuring tape around her neck and a tablet in her hands. They walked through the kitchen together, discussing possibilities, new countertops, updated appliances, maybe knocking down the wall to the dining room to create an open concept. "This is a good solid house," Carol said, running her hand along the doorframe. "Just needs some love and attention. When we're done, it's going to be beautiful." "I know," Natalie said, and she meant it. After Carol left with measurements and ideas and a promise to send an estimate by Monday, Natalie sat at the kitchen table with her laptop. She opened her email and found a message from Rachel Donnelly. "Just wanted to check in. How are you holding up? The legal side of everything is completely finished. You're officially free and clear. If you need anything, don't hesitate to reach out. But I suspect you're going to be just fine. Take care of yourself. Rachel." Natalie typed a response. "Thank you for everything you did for me. You didn't just help me protect my assets. You helped me protect myself. I'm grateful beyond words. And yes, I'm going to be just fine. Better than fine, actually. I'm going to be happy." She hit send and closed the laptop. Happy. When was the last time she had felt genuinely happy? Not content, not comfortable, not safe, but actually deeply happy? She couldn't remember. Maybe before the marriage started to crumble. Maybe even before that. back when she was younger and hadn't yet learned to dim her own light to make someone else feel brighter. But she could feel it now, lurking at the edges of her awareness, the possibility of happiness, real, authentic happiness that came from within instead of from external validation. She was going to find it. She was certain of that. That afternoon, she went to her painting class. She had signed up on a whim 2 weeks ago, thinking it would be a good distraction. But as she stood in front of the easel, brush in hand, she realized it was more than that. It was permission. Permission to create something imperfect. Permission to try and fail and try again. Permission to express herself without judgment or criticism or the need to be anything other than exactly who she was. She painted abstractly, using colors she liked without worrying about whether they made sense together. Blues and golds and deep burgundies. The instructor, a man with paint-stained fingers and kind eyes, stopped by her easel. "Interesting choices," he said. "What are you feeling when you paint this?" Natalie paused, really considering the question. "Freedom," she said finally. "I'm feeling freedom." He smiled. "Then you're doing it right." By the end of the class, her painting was a mess of color and emotion. It wasn't good. It probably wasn't even passable. But it was hers. Completely and authentically hers. She brought it home and hung it in her bedroom, right where she could see it first thing every morning. A reminder that she was allowed to create beauty, even if it was imperfect, especially if it was imperfect. That evening, she had dinner with her colleague-turned-friend, a woman named Sarah, who worked in a different department. They met at a Thai restaurant and talked about work and life and everything in between. Sarah was going through her own difficult situation. An aging parent with dementia who required more and more care. "I don't know how you did it," Sarah said over pad thai. "How you kept working and functioning and handling everything with your divorce. I feel like I'm barely keeping my head above water, just dealing with my mom." "You do what you have to do," Natalie said. "You find strength you didn't know you had. You ask for help when you need it. You take it one day at a time. Some days you survive. Some days you actually live. You celebrate the living days and forgive yourself for the surviving days." Sarah nodded, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "That's good advice. Thank you." "You're welcome. And if you need anything, someone to talk to or someone to just sit with you while you cry, call me. I mean it." They hugged in the parking lot before going their separate ways. As Natalie drove home, she thought about how much had changed in just a few months. She had started this journey alone, terrified, with no idea how she was going to survive what David had planned for her. Now she had friends, real friends who showed up for her. She had skills she had developed through necessity. She had confidence she had earned through battle. She had a future she had fought to protect. And most importantly, she had herself, the real version, not the compromised version she had become in her marriage. Not the scared version she had been when she first discovered the $7.50 charge, but the strong, capable, resilient version she had always been underneath, waiting to emerge. When she pulled into her driveway, she sat in the car for a moment, looking at her house. The lights were on inside from the timers she had set. Warm, welcoming, safe. She grabbed her purse and walked to the front door. As she reached for her keys, she noticed something on the porch. A small package, similar to the one Jennifer had left weeks ago with the compass necklace. She picked it up carefully. This one had a return address. Margaret Harper, David's mother. Natalie's heart clenched. She carried the package inside, set it on the kitchen table, and stared at it for a long moment before opening it. Inside was a small leather-bound journal, the kind with cream-colored pages and a ribbon bookmark. There was a note on top. "Dear Natalie, I hope you don't mind me sending this. When David was a boy, maybe 7 or 8 years old, he went through a phase where he was terrified of making mistakes. He would freeze up rather than risk doing something wrong. His father and I took him to a therapist who gave him this advice. Write down your fears. Look at them. Then write down what you would do if you were brave. Eventually, you become the brave version. I thought perhaps you might need this reminder now. Not because you aren't already brave, you clearly are, but because even the bravest people need permission to start fresh, to write a new story, to become whoever they want to be next. This journal is my gift to you. May you fill it with dreams and plans, and all the beautiful things you deserve. With admiration and hope, Margaret. Natalie opened the journal. The first page was blank, waiting, full of possibility. She picked up a pen and thought for a moment. Then she wrote, "My name is Natalie Harper. I am 39 years old. I am divorced. I own my home. I am learning to paint. I am learning to cook Italian food. I am learning who I am when I'm not trying to be what someone else needs me to be. I am scared sometimes. I am lonely sometimes. But I am also free. And freedom, I am discovering, is worth more than comfort, worth more than security, worth more than the illusion of love. This is my new beginning. This is the first page of the rest of my life. And I get to write it however I want." She set down the pen and closed the journal. Tomorrow she would write more. Tomorrow she would make plans and set goals and dream about possibilities. But tonight, she was simply going to exist in this moment, in this house, in this life she had fought so hard to protect. She made herself a cup of tea, the same kind she had been drinking the day David left to pick up his final belongings. But this time, she didn't set out a receipt on the table, didn't create a symbolic moment, didn't need the drama of closure. She simply sat in her kitchen, drinking her tea, feeling the warmth of the mug in her hands. Outside, the November darkness had settled fully. Inside, her house glowed with light and possibility. Somewhere across town, David was living with his consequences. Vanessa was sitting in a jail cell awaiting trial. The money was repaid. The legal matters were settled. The chapter was closed. And here, in this kitchen, in this house, in this life, Natalie was finally, completely, beautifully free. She looked at the pale pink roses on her counter, the ones she had bought for herself. She adjusted one of the petals and smiled. It had started with $7.50, a small charge at a coffee shop that unraveled a marriage and exposed a scheme. The smallest detail that changed everything. But it wasn't ending with coffee. It was ending with tea, with quiet, with peace, with the understanding that she hadn't just survived this ordeal. She had won. Not because she had destroyed David, though he had destroyed himself. Not because she had taken everything, though she had protected what was rightfully hers. Not because she had gotten revenge, though justice had been served. She had won because she had emerged from this nightmare knowing exactly who she was and what she was capable of. She had won because she had learned that love without trust was nothing. That partnership without honesty was poison. That she was strong enough to walk away from anything that didn't serve her, no matter how much history they shared. She had won because she was sitting in her own house, drinking her own tea, planning her own future, answering to no one. She was 40 years old in 3 months, divorced, starting over, and instead of feeling devastated, she felt hopeful, because this wasn't an ending, it was a beginning. And this time, she was writing the story herself. This time, the only person she needed to be was exactly who she already was. This time, she was enough, more than enough. She was free, and freedom, she had learned, was priceless. She finished her tea, washed the mug, and turned off the kitchen lights. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and new opportunities. But tonight, she was simply going to sleep peacefully in her own bed, in her own house, in her own life. The life she had saved, the life she deserved, the life that was finally, completely, beautifully her own. If you enjoyed the story, leave a like and subscribe to the channel. And drop a comment below. What city are you watching from? And if your heart tells you to, feel free to leave me a tip on Buy Me a Coffee. Just check the first pinned comment. Thanks for keeping me company and for the coffee, and I'll see you in the next story.